So, we've got another exciting panel for you, The Path to Patriotism, which is going to look at rebuilding trust and identity in democracy. So please welcome Anna Sarwar, the leader of the Scottish Labour Party, Stefan Löfven, the former Prime Minister of Sweden and President of European Socialists, Raphael Glucksmann, Pedro Abramove, and Charlene Brumskine, with Patrick Gaspard moderating. Please join us.
Good afternoon, friends. It has been a long day of thoughtful engagements with a fair amount of diagnosis and prescriptions on the challenges that we face in a moment of the growth of right-wing autocratic movements. I can remember a global progress discussion that we had, a summit that we had in Italy 4 years ago, where we were trying to use our powers of divination to determine whether or not the autocratic surge that we were experiencing was just an episodic moment or if it was a durable movement. There is no doubt at this point, as a consequence of the force of personalities, cataclysmic economic upheaval, and the reality of the algorithmic governance of our lives, that their moment has become a movement, and I'd argue that their movement has a vitality that is stronger than the vitality in ours, because it is grounded in culture and a set of values that ladder up to a clear set of national narratives. In truth, we seem to have ceded the notion of love of nation over to the yahoos. In the opening panel this morning, Prime Minister Carney stated that, quote, nostalgia is not a strategy. But is he right? Isn't nostalgia a very clear strategy? Perhaps it isn't for us, but a nostalgic yearning for a yesteryear where apparently all the women were strong and all the men were good-looking seems to have been the clearest point of narrative strategy from Budapest straight through Washington, D.C. I want to explore this within the context of the work of cultural narrative building in the project of the center-left, with an overwhelming question about what it looks like to rebuild trust in the efficacy of our governance, not based solely on delivery, which we've heard a lot about today, but on a sense of shared destiny. Now, with the phenomenal cadre that we have on stage, no one at all is going to accuse us of a lack of ambition when you see just how high we're going to aim. We're going to, deal with these questions, and we're going to do so as I think about what was posited by the Prime Minister of Iceland a little while ago when she said that if you want to deal with the polarization on the right, don't increase the polarization on the left. But even as we work to not increase polarization, there's some work that we've got to do to anchor in a sense of clear identity, but broad national identity. So I'm going to open panelists with a question for all of you. I will, of course, start to my left, and I'm going to ask you, Charlene, first, and then everyone else, I want you to take it up in order, ending at the very end of the line. So here's the opening question. Progressives often find ourselves on the losing side of polling or indicators of trust, even when we deliver on campaign promises. Let's take this conversation beyond getting credit in an election and consider what role delivery and reform have to play in creating a clear pipeline of trust that can lead to a durable center-left narrative. Where do we start? How do we center both hearts and minds in this work and better connect pocketbooks to those aspirations?
Thank you. Hopefully you can hear me. I'm Charlene Brumskine. I am from Liberia, West Africa. I want to first thank the Global Progress Action Summit and all of my co-panelists and Patrick here for the opportunity to bring leaders together to discuss these very critical issues. I must say that where I come from, it's almost a privilege to discuss what we're discussing. even as we discuss beyond delivery, Liberia is one of the poorest nations on the globe. When we talk about issues of housing and job creation and these ideological, theories that have been tossed around today, we don't know what the global South is, what the global North is. We don't use those terms. We don't use the terminology left and right and progressivism. We're trying to figure out how a 14-year-old child who is going to deliver in a village with no hospital, no midwife, how she is going to ensure, how we are going to ensure that she's not one of the numbers of women who die in childbirth. We're talking about a child in Monrovia, the capital city, trying to get clean drinking water before we talk about, some of these other lofty ideas. So we have to talk about culture, but delivery we have to speak to delivery. And as we speak to delivery, something that has a word that has been floating around is this idea of dignity. How do we respect the most basic human rights? How do we move from these, lofty policy ideas, which are absolutely necessary, policy over politics, but outside of this room, and make sure that we are speaking to, as the Prime Minister of Iceland said earlier, the average human and to their hearts and their minds. They don't know what's happening here. But what they do know is that they need to ensure that there's electricity tomorrow. So quickly about national identity and culture, we are known as the country of Charles Taylor, the country of civil war, the country of Ebola, and then the only good thing we're known of is that we had the first woman, democratically elected female leader in Africa. So Liberia is also grappling with its own cultural identity. Who are we? How do we trust that our leaders actually care about our basic needs? So cultural identity means nothing if basic needs aren't met. I'll stop there. I know you'll come back.
I'll come back, and I'm going to press you a little because I think that the word dignity is a hugely important one to use in this space as we think about the kinds of outcomes that we're trying to drive towards. And I can't help but make a little bit of mischief and note how surprised the President of the United States was to learn that Liberia was an English-speaking nation.
Very good
question
English.
Of identity. Please, Pedro.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here, especially in this amazing panel and with my friend Patrick moderating. I think and I take definitely your provocation on deliverism, right? The idea that what was missing for progressives was to deliver. Because the response to that, of course, is to establish a kind of technocratic mindset that was just think what exactly, right, are the specific things that we need to deliver and try to organize politics after that. And this is clearly the tail wagging the dog, right? This is not, it is politics that will, and it's the only way to organize policy. And Europeans are not used to having Latin America speaking about their continent, but being here, for me, social democracy, it is probably the most impressive and the most political experiment that was ever built in humanity. And this was not built out of rooms, offices with air conditioner of inside a university. It was built out of the struggle of the workers in each of the European countries that negotiated the distribution of wealth through the state to people. Right? It was not designed by the debate between Bernstein and Kautsky. It was designed in different countries by exactly that struggle. And I think that That's what's missing. Like exactly we need to focus much more on what people are struggling for instead of trying to tell people what they should be struggling for. We should build politics after those struggles. I think Aya, when she was speaking in the previous panel, when she speaks about the fact that Gen Z in Kenya, in Senegal, in Indonesia, in Nepal right now, they are not fighting just for democracy. They are fighting for affordability, for against youth unemployment, for against energy cuts. Those are the things that are mobilizing people. And once we have a mobilization that is based on that we are not trying also as Rajab said in the other, that we're not trying to out-Trump Trump, right? We are not trying to just say, okay, this is what we deliver. And on the values, let's try to be more conservative than the other side. Let's play on their field. It's the opposite. Let's redefine the values based on what people are struggling for. Let's look on the concrete struggle that are definitely based on socioeconomic issues, build an utopia, build a dream based on that, right? And and then come back and propose a government that all the time is trying to respond to that instead of trying to just organize things based on technocratic ideas and try to sell that to people based on specific polls on all the specific issues, which is with what a lot of progressive politics try to do.
That's great. And the thread that I'm going to pull up from that fantastic intervention, Pedro, is your notion of identifying what is shared in struggle. I think that's really important in being able to craft a common narrative. So we have a little bit on dignity, a little bit on shared struggle, and a number of other questions that we're going to revisit. Please.
Yeah, I mean, I will share something that we are all very happy to be here, and I am especially honored to be part of this panel. And since I'm French, I will be slightly provocative. I'm not sure I agree. And it's good, because then we will have a discussion. You know, I was listening to some of the panels, and I was thinking, so basically now you have a deep wave of cultural warfare everywhere in Western democracies, everywhere. And guys come to us and they tell us, you know, I think my civilization will disappear and my nation will cease to exist. And we have very sophisticated response on concrete issues. We will raise taxes by 2% for the upper middle class, while diminishing by 8% for the underdogs from this region. I mean, I don't think it will work. You have hundreds of thousands of people who really believe that we don't care about the future of our nation because we are progressive, globalist, everything, yes? And we respond to this anxiety, to this thirst for a meaning for their nation with sophisticated technocratic questions and response on delivery. They don't give a damn whether we delivered on promise to do this or that or this or how many percentage. No. They really now are speaking about what it means to be British, what it means to be French, what it means to be American, and we have to give a response at the level of the question. So that's why I was very happy to listen to the Prime Minister Starmer in his opening speech speaking about patriotic renewal. Why? Because that's not their flag. We can take this flag and we can speak about it. And our conception of what identity means, of what nation means, it's greater than theirs. They want countries that are, you know, surrounded by walls. But you know, in the Greek times, Theban walls, yeah, where the biggest and the tallest walls you have ever built. And everybody died inside these walls out of plague. And you have another way of speaking about identity, about nation. But this other way, I mean, are we at the level that's required from us? when we speak about what it means to be British, or what it means to be French, or what it means to be European, or what it means to be American, I'm not sure. So we have a new narrative to write now without our usual words, you know, the key words of good progressive guys. I mean, oh yeah, I speak. But then, I mean, I'm sorry, I will be short, don't worry, even if I'm French. There was a great anthropologist called Pierre Clastre, and he was working on the societies without states. And usually people were saying, oh, that's, you know, really barbarian societies, they don't have statehood. And they were called society without state. And he said, no, it's society built against statehood. And he was studying the Amazonian communities and the institution, especially of shamans. And the shamans, they were there to exorcise the emergence of kings. They didn't want kings. They didn't want vertical power. So they had shamans. And the shamans, they were put in the middle of the village, and they were speaking a language that nobody in the village understood. And people were crossing the village, and they were seeing the shamans, and they were making fun of the shamans, and they were insulting the shamans, and they were not caring at all about the shaman, and therefore they didn't need a king. It was ridiculous. I'm a French Republican, but I was not speaking about the monarchy or anything, don't worry. And we progressive, if we keep our language this way, we will look like the shamans of Pierre Clastre, with our own language, our own discussion, and then people out will be totally, fascinated by us, but not listening to us. So we need to respond to their question. That's the first thing. When they are saying, our civilization is in crisis, our country will disappear, we will have to say, no, and this is what we offer as a narrative for what it means to belong to this nation. And that's why I think the speech of the Prime Minister this morning was very good. Sorry.
Raphael, before we go to Stefan, I have to say that you're French and I'm Haitian, which means that we take your cooking and we add some spice to it. So I'll take your provocation and go a step further. And I agree with much of what Pedro had to say, but we all know that the political graveyard is littered with politicians who had the 20-point plan and a history of accomplishments. But Pedro did say that we have to be caught listening. And I'd lift up the example. During the presidential elections in America last year, you heard Donald Trump and his vice president going on about Haitians eating cats and dogs in Springfield, Ohio, and we thought, who could believe such a thing? But if you know anything about Springfield, Ohio, you know that the population there declined by 20% in a 15-year period, and you had a rapidly aging white population that just then saw migrants come in at the invitation of the Republican governor to help stabilize the economy, and their response was they didn't want the stability. Instead, they were feeling like an existential threat to their identity, and we were not speaking to that. We had our 10-point plan, and they could not hear our 10-point plan. So I agree with you on their sense of existentialism and how we stick a nationalist narrative to it that is center-left. Stefan?
Thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. First, I think that we deliver matters, absolutely. Saying anything else would be crazy. So deliver matters, but sometimes we don't talk about what we have delivered. So we keep reforming societies and we move on and we move on. We're more ambition, but very rarely do we stand still and ask, okay, where did we came from? Where did we come from? From there, now we're here. Now we're moving forward. We do that too very, very rarely. I was invited to the Norwegian Social Democratic Party, Arbeiderpartiet, a few years ago, and they had 1.5, 2 years in government. So I needed to look into, okay, so what have they achieved? And that was a lot. And I asked my trade union friends in Norway, what have this government? And I asked my trade union friends in Norway, what have this government done for you? Oh, a lot. Okay, do you talk about it? Do you brag? We need to brag a little more. That's not about saying that we are perfect, but we also have to understand that this environment now that we're working is totally different than just 20 years ago. I mean, with the social media and all that. It's totally different. So when we are talking pensions, jobs, housing, health, schools, all that matters for people in the daily life, but that's not the issue that's on top of the agenda. On top of the agenda is migration and crime. So we have to learn to address that. Just to say, we need to hear your questions. What's your questions? So we need to address that, as Magdalena Andersson also said here earlier today. So we need to address that to be able to also have a discussion on the issues that are our home turf. Lastly, message and narrative was mentioned here. What these right-wing extremists have managed to do is to bypass, it's not logic thinking for many of the followers of the right wing. It's not logic thinking, it's something else. It's fear, it's anxiety, so it's a feeling more. And these far right have managed to use that feeling so that they connect to these people. So what we need to do, I think, is to combine the political, what we still need to do, all the reforms, that, but also think of, okay, how can we also attract people's more gut feeling or heart feeling?
But can I get you to be a little bit more granular? You've now been dealing for a number of years now with this question of migration in your politics. We know that this is an age of anxiety, but as you said, people are responding from a place of feeling. Guess what, folks? We should appreciate that because of the way we communicate with one another now, we are going to be living in a century of feelings. That's it. This is the only way that politics works now. So given the experience that you've had of having to hold a political enterprise together in the face of the feelings that people have about migration, are there some examples that you might pull up for us that are specific around how you've tried to build a new narrative that's not nativist, that pushes in a, from the perspective of the center left, but meets people where they're at on this issue?
Yeah, we need to meet the way we always met them. It's not where you are from, the color of your skin, or what you believe in or do not believe in. We need to get back to the left-right discussion, and that we have so much in common with people from other countries. I think we acted too slow as labor movement when globalization really took off, because with new technology came first the possibilities for enterprises to move their production all over the globe. And we saw that happen from Western Europe to Eastern Europe, then from Eastern Europe to east of Eastern Europe, and so on. But it also made it possible to move capital in such a way that the national grip on the national financial situation, we lost it. But the question is, did we move with democracy into the European level, the global level? Today we are actually discussing, or United Nations and OECD are now discussing, how can we cooperate on taxation globally? Because we know we have a lot of huge companies that they pay 0.5% in tax or 1% in tax. And then we can say we can't afford what we want to do on the global level. Yes, we can. It's not financial resources we need to take that fight as well, because that's a left-right, and it's obvious that we can do so much, but we haven't been there yet. But that's one of I think, our most important issues now, to prove also, yes, we can afford. The 5 richest people in the world owns $1 trillion together. 1,000 billion US, the 5 richest. And the total assets, financial assets around the world is somewhat 450 trillion US. So don't tell me that we can't afford. We can afford.
What's a few trillion between friends?
Excuse me?
What's a few trillion between friends? That point is really important. I think across all of our societies for generations, the right has kind of owned this argument around smaller government, local autonomy, but we're actually in a moment where there is a demand that's coming up from their base for investment in community outcomes. It's been interesting to see the backlash against the investments in Ukraine, in the Ukraine war, against Putin's incursion, where so many on the right have been, in their grassroots, have been saying, you've always told us there's no money on healthcare and education and the things that we care about and need, but there seem to be endless resources for this other thing. So I think you're onto something terribly important there that I don't want to lose. My friend, you have the original question, but you've heard all these interventions, and I know that you are fond of improvising. So let's see where you take this.
I was thinking, listening, that if you think a Frenchman on a mic can hog a mic, wait till you give the mic to a Scotsman. You won't get the mic back. Listening to all the contributions, actually a lot of it resonates with me, because I think if you look at some of the biggest challenges facing progressive parties right across the globe, if you can diagnose it centrally, and actually you've heard it probably in lots of the panel conversations today, is we compete in the politics of the mind and we get beat in the politics of the heart. And when it's mind versus heart, the heart's always going to win. In election, no matter which country you are, anywhere in the world. So we as progressives think we've got a big problem in our nation, we need to come up with a big policy idea. And when we get the big policy idea, we need to explain that policy idea and what it means in different parts. And whilst we're doing that and thinking we're being intellectual, someone else is beating on the argument because they've grasped someone's emotion and grasped their heart. So we have, as progressives, got to compete in the politics of the heart, not just compete in the politics of the mind. Secondly, we've got to tell a better story about our nation. When you're up against divisive politicians and populist politics, it's easy for them to tell a story about our countries. We're not telling a compelling story about our countries. We've got to tell an equally compelling story about our country. Third, progressive politics, for many, many decades now, talks about the politics of hard decisions, tough decisions, sacrifices. And what people hear is, that's hard decisions and sacrifices that I have to make, not that they have to make. So we've got to stop talking about the politics of just the hard decisions and the sacrifices, and instead demonstrate the decisions about where we're trying to take our countries and where we're trying to take our world into the future. Fourth, and this is a condition that besets every Labour Party everywhere in the world, is if we do something great, we're going to whisper it. And if we do something bad or we disagree with it, we're going to shout it from the rooftops. And so in any policy of any progressive party, every single other person in that political party is going to focus on the 10% they disagree with rather than 90% they agree with. And if we're not going to project the positives that we have on in any individual nation, how are the citizens going to hear that and believe that message too? And finally, our politics is fundamentally flipped. We now live in a political age of vibes rather than of day-to-day political grids or systems that we normally operate in. The vast majority of the population don't give a damn about politics. And they don't think much of politicians. And I think we have to just accept that sad reality. We live and breathe politics every single day. It's what gets us up in the morning. It's what makes our heart flutter during the day. And it's what we dream about when we go to sleep. The rest of the population are worried about putting food on the table. They're worried about the kind of school their kid's going to go to. They're worried about whether the loved one's going to get access to a social care package or they're going to get access to a hospital appointment when they need it. They're worried about the safety and security in their community. They go on their social media feed and they're fed narratives around a world that is on fire, a community and a nation that feels more and more insecure, and that all we can ever wish for or hope for is more decline in our lives. And they might have the odd flip of what is a general vibe coming from a political party and a political movement. We have got to build in the vibes of our movements and what's happening in our individual countries if we are going to build support and actually take on the populists and those that want to divide us. And the final thing is patriotism has been mentioned a lot and identity has been mentioned a lot. There is a way that we can talk about patriotism and identity that doesn't make it look like or sound like we're down in our country. Because that's one of the big things that they say is these people don't believe in our country. They're down in our country. They only talk down our country. We're the true ones that stand up for our country and stand up for our people. Actually, we've got to demonstrate that there is a heart and an emotion and an attachment to our national identities that makes us the real drivers of progress in our nation. And if we win the heart and the emotion and the storytelling, we can beat the populists everywhere in the world.
That's fantastic. So now we've run the gamut from dignity to vibes. I had a feeling that, that we'd make quite a journey here. I'm going to come back to how you've teed up this question of identity, but I'm going to give that a moment. I'm going to skip around a little bit. I'm going to come back to you on this broader question of trust, but it would be unfair not to give Pedro an opportunity to have a rejoinder to the provocation that he received. But as you do that, because I know that you've been itching to do that, Pedro, I want to throw another question at you. You provide leadership for the Open Society Foundations, which is on the front line of helping us to create some connective tissue that enables us to better see one another across this vast movement. I see your outstanding board member, Daniel Sachs, here in the front row, and we thank you both for that at a time when you are standing alone in attack. I want you to help me think through in this moment when the right-wing movements have been able to take advantage of a hyper-sovereignty to make a villain out of the notion of solidarity. You're somebody who cut your teeth in as a thinker and a strategist in Brazilian politics. Is there something from the experience in Brazil that you've had or that's occurring right now that might give us some way to fashion a kind of patriotism even that's not nativist and that helps us to navigate through this vast challenge that we have in our narrative?
Definitely. I'll start maybe by saying that I didn't really understand what we disagreed with in the, but it's
he's French. But
it's maybe the fact that I was speaking about European Social Democrat, even if speaking about the Amazon and the shamanic was okay for, but I think we have a lot to learn from the indigenous knowledge in moments like this. But bringing to the Brazilian experience, and that's an excellent example, because it was the one place that we can look at right now in which nationalism and patriotism was reclaimed by the left. It was, in a way, a gift, right, that we got from Donald Trump in Brazil, but it was exactly the ability, but a gift that was accepted, right, because immediately when the tariffs were imposed, when Trump said that the tariffs were imposed because of Bolsonaro's conviction, because he tried to, because of a coup attempt in Brazil, it gave the opportunity to say, no, we, the left, Lula is defending Brazil. And so the right went to the streets with a huge American flag, and the left went to the streets with a huge Brazilian flag. But it was exactly a patriotism that was based on solidarity. It was a patriotism that was based on we need to defend our country in a way that we can include everyone, that we can preserve jobs, that we can, and it was not exclusive, right? And I think that patriotism is we haven't sorted out international politics. So politics, the idea that our common destiny depends on other people, depends on our community, which is the beauty of politics, it happens at the nation state. So patriotism is what can inspire democracy. I think exactly the question is not to fight against patriotism, but it is how to build patriotism around those values. If you read Samuel Huntington's last book, Who Are We? It is a definition of what he thinks America should be that was clearly there, right? It is, America is an Anglo-American culture. Everything outside that is an American. That's the book, right? And that's what Donald Trump is saying right now. We need to reclaim, for example, in the United States, the idea that being patriotic is the American dream that can include much more people and that can provide to much more people, right? So I think the idea of exactly building a dream, the vibes, the dignity, right? A patriotic idea around dignity is the only way to steal the flag, the national flag from the extreme right now.
That's fantastic, and you can please clap for him. Don't be so polite. You know, so you planted your flag firmly in Shirlene's space of dignity. So let's go back to you on this question, and I love all of what Pedro just said. it was lofty but grounded. When I think of lofty but grounded, I think of a speech that you made to the Liberian Bar Association, where you were really damn challenging, and you said to them that trust is the truest currency of justice. You were pushing out boldly against corruption, about inefficiencies. I don't know how well received it was that day, but from afar across the Atlantic, it was incredibly well received. But as you think about that conversation that you had, and you think about the question that Pedro just put to us about who are we, right? You were lifting up a question of national identity in that question about Liberia and how you face corruption. How do you take up that issue of delivery, efficacy, with the shading of safety and security and this notion of the identity that comes out of your investment in dignity?
Thank you.
It was a great speech.
Thank you. I'm a lawyer by trade, and this idea of justice, particularly for us in Africa, has for too long it's eluded us, and I think I can, if I humbly say, I can help my co-panelists who certainly come from a very different type of nation than I come from. But when we talk about justice, so yesterday, Claire, I believe her name was, talked about progressives still being the big tent party. And I look around today and yesterday, and where we have representation from Europe and, the US and Canada, and we had a session from Latin America, but there are no African voices here besides myself, I think Aya. And I wonder, how do progressives have authentic conversations about ideas that affect you? We talk about justice, but nations that are entangled, intertwined with your issues are not at the table. Migration is a huge issue. How do we talk about migration and not bring some African leaders to bear here when our people are running from some, and I speak very generally, lack of justice, lack of access to equitable services? So I hope that we begin to talk about justice. But let me talk about it from my perspective from Liberia. I'm going to give an example. We speak over 17 dialects, but because of Liberia's historical relationship with the US, English is our first language. Our laws are in English. Our courts, justice is meted out in the English language. And we probably have we have a very low literacy rate in terms of those who read and write English. How is justice served when the average Liberian, literally the average Liberian, cannot read a law book or understand, and we have justice being meted out? So we've started a local radio station in dialects, my dialect, to make sure that the average Liberian in just one dialect so far understands what justice is and what the laws are. Sorry about that, I'm talking a little bit too long. So to come back to nationalism and justice, we have to make sure that everyone feels a sense of justice and equity, and then that gives a sense of nationalism. May I just say something quickly to my South American and European colleagues here? This idea of ensuring, progressivism and we all are part of your countries. I think we need to speak, and I want to commend you for your determination, dignity, delivery, but determination to not shy away from these very important issues. Like, even if the right is beating you up and saying, this is not French enough, this is not Swedish enough, be determined to stick to what your morals and your values are. So I just wanted to conclude with that.
No, that's fantastic. And we have exactly 7 minutes to get 3 more responses, and I know that you all are going to be sharp and brilliant. But I want to go from Charlene's point about migration, and I'm going to go to Scotland once more. And I'm probably going to Scotland now because one of the great things about international conferences is that you get to pick up some slang, and I picked up some slang from you, my friend, that I just have to use.
I'm intrigued.
You made a point about the instability, the insecurity that people feel in their lives, and in the Scottish context. You said that people make decisions that sometimes they get accused of racism, but it's not necessarily coming from a place of racism. You said people feel scunnered. I love that word. That people feel scunnered, that somehow the whole system is working against them, and there's an instability that breeds the nativism and all the things. So I just wonder, thinking about how earlier today we heard about the importance of reframing security to encompass the economic imperative of feeling control over your daily life. As you think about people who are feeling scunnered in Scotland and elsewhere, what's the ability of our center-left politics to restore that sense of stability and security in a way that engages across differences? I'll also note the vicious attacks that you have personally taken on in that context, and I commend you for your courage, but also for the ability to extend grace to people who have really done a kind of spiritual violence to you in the politics. So thank you.
Thank you. That's very, very kind of you to say. So scunnered is a Scottish term, which basically means that people just feel genuinely pissed off about everything that exists in their life. I can't think of a more polite way of saying it than that. And who can blame them? And I think this is part of the challenge for progressives, who can blame them? People don't feel as if their local services work, their NHS works, their transport system works. They feel as if they're working more hours than they've ever worked before, every hour God sends, but their pound is worth less than it was before. And they feel as if they're being asked to work harder and harder and possibly pay more and more and get less and less in return. And in the face of that, you've got a level, let's be upfront about it, there's a level of racism and a level of misogyny and a level of, whether it be anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, or any other form of prejudice or hate, that those that want to divide us will play into people's fears and say, rather than go for the left of centre politics that wants to explain how the solution will be presented in your life, let's instead play the politics of blame. These things wouldn't happen in your life if only it wasn't for these people over here. And that politics of these people over here and that us versus them is the single greatest challenge facing progressive politicians everywhere right around the world. But we've got to understand why people feel scunnered and how it's legitimate, to be honest, for them to feel scunnered. And I think one of the harshest lessons for progressive parties is, I think we have to change the way we take on that conversation and how we communicate that. Because when Nigel Farage says something racist, and we then make it sound like we're saying that anyone who may be tempted to vote for him or vote for reform, therefore, is racist, we push the very people we need to pull towards us away from us. Or if we say, we are delivering X, Y, or Z, why don't you understand it? It makes it sound like we're saying, we've got this, we're the intelligent ones, you're just too stupid to understand. And I think if we present ourselves to the public to say, you're either too stupid, or you just don't get it, or you're too racist, or you're not Scottish enough, or you're not British enough, we repel the very people we need to pull towards us. And so how we communicate, the policy offer we have and how we present that, how we make it real for people, is also going to be really important. And the final thing I'll say is, whenever a progressive party is in trouble anywhere in the world, we always say, we're listening. See, when you tell a member of the public we're listening, what they think a politician means by that is, I'm pretending to listen, it's going to go in this ear, and it's going to go out the other one. We need to stop listening, and instead we need to connect. And if we connect with our communities and our people, then we can confront the populists.
Fantastic. So, please, you can, you should. So, I'm going to, here's a bit of theater for you. I want to preview a provocation. That's going to be the last question. So I'm going to now ask Stefan a very thoughtful question and give him an opportunity to give me a thoughtful response. But here's the provocation I'm going to throw at the very end to you, Raphael. So just be ready for this provocation. I'm a New York nationalist. I'm proud of all things that are in New York. What the heck were you thinking when you said that the French are going to come and reclaim the Statue of Liberty from the New York harbor just because our president can't live up to the values? So you're sending a flotilla to New York to reclaim the statue. I'm going to give you a chance to tell us what the heck you're thinking on that front. But first, I'm going to ask our former prime minister, our thoughtful leader, to respond to something that he has said in the past. You once said that for every democratic principle that is weakened in the EU's voice in the world is equally weakened. We can only be a force for free media and rule of law in our neighborhood if we have free media and independent courts in our union. So help me understand from the perspective of nationalism even, how can subnational relationships and solutions take on a new role to meet transnational challenges given the gap in trust, leadership, and delivery, and the cynicism that exists in all of our societies increasingly about these multilateral spaces that folks think we overinvest in?
In 34 seconds?
No.
Okay. I think we have to underline that all the subnational, national, regional, global, all these levels are connected, and we are dependent on all these levels. So we can see very good cooperation directly between cities, local communities in Sweden with other local communities in other parts of the world, and that strengthened this thinking. What I am a bit worried about this growing nationalism, and please don't misunderstand me. Of course, I'm very proud if Sweden managed to win a national football game and all that, and I'm proud of so much. But what this nationalism is growing into now is that it's us only, and that is the dangerous part. So we have to see that we are dependent on, I mean, Sweden's GDP is about 50% of it is export. So it goes without saying that we are dependent on others. We're dependent on the European Union, yes, because this is the volume that we need in terms of money, in terms of diplomatic and force and all this. So that goes without saying. But we have to think beyond also that. So we should build, you could call it a business case, I don't know exactly what to call it, how it would affect people's daily life positively if the poorer part of the world also got the same opportunities as the richer part of the world. Let me give you just one example. China lifted, and I mean, China's political system is not mine, but anyhow, 600 million roughly were lifted out of poverty into some kind of middle class. That was good for these people, it was good for China, but it also affected the world economy because they could contribute in the economy. Africa is now the continent that will grow during this century, and you'll have a labor force that is huge. It's growing by the day. Now, if we also invest in Africa and other parts of the world, lifting people out of poverty. I was talking to Ellen Johnson-Sirleaf. I was cooperating with Ellen Johnson-Sirleaf on the High-Level Advisor Board, and she kept reminding us about the data illiteracy and the digital illiteracy. And that gap is growing by the day. We have 2 billion people lacking access to fresh water. 2 billion people. So, of course, if we start investing and say we are not throwing away money, but we are investing, it's good for them, it's good for the country, but it's also good for us. So display that business case, whatever we call it, I think we can have another discussion about what's right or wrong.
Thank you. Charlene started us off with dignity. I think that you took us to a place of strength. What is it that we take up in our narrative that indicates that these are spaces of strength for us at the international level, but at the level of the individual? Those investments give us, as the center left, a purchase on the notion of strength building in our politics. So, my friend, you get to close this out, and I'm provoking you a bit on the Statue of Liberty, but the question really ultimately is, what is it that we've got to do that's going to enable us to build back ownership over that narrative of solidarity that we owned post-1945 until about 2016. And you can bring the statue into it if you want. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free.
But first, I will tell you a secret, because we are just you and me, in a table. It was metaphorical. And unfortunately, the Trump administration did not get it. They took it first degree, so they had to respond directly, and it created a huge trouble in the European Parliament, because we received, in my office, more than 1,300 Statue of Liberty, with insults from MAGA people saying, that's the only Statue of Liberty you will ever get, you, blah, 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 blah. And then I will stop quoting them, because it's not like real poetry. And I could not write to all of them that, it's an image. I didn't plan to go with it, but I had some suggestion, by the way, from Poland, from several states, European states, saying, if you go for a real operation, I'm coming with you. And to these ones, I responded like, okay, let's build the strength of Europe. Maybe we give them the statue and we just take the flame. That's the meaning of it. If you like the statue itself, we will take the love for freedom. Yeah. No, but what was the meaning of that? It's because first, I want French people to be proud again and to think they have a destiny. And their destiny cannot be the destiny that's offered to them by Le Pen, Bardella, and all the far-right people. And I wanted to tell them, we deserve better than this as French. Look at this American administration. They did not understand what made America great. So how do you want them to make it great again? And if they did not understand that, then let's take the torch to ourselves, because that's what made France great. And I want France to be great again, but based on these principles and ideas that made it great, not on this bigotry that would make it small. And also, I think, because you were speaking about that, I think we progressives should stop being afraid saying things. Like we go to a rally and you say things, and then you don't give a damn whether it's the right wording, not the right wording, because then otherwise you have Trump in front of you, and you are the scripted one. Nobody cares what you say, blah, blah, blah. Of course, everything is perfectly kasher or halal or whatever. But nobody cares. And then he says bullshit, and everybody speaks about him. Okay, then everybody was speaking about... Yeah, I know, I'm too long. But just, I will not respond to your question because I'm French. I will just build on what you said about strength. Yeah, you say strength. The true question is, what's the definition of strength? And I have just 2 examples, and they are very short. I organized a conference, and it was a Ukrainian writer who went to the front line during 2.5 years. And I invited him to the European Parliament because he wrote a fantastic book of love letters to his wife from the front line to her who was a refugee in France. And he was explaining to us with a very soft voice, calm, how it felt when he, for the first time, had to kill him, a poet, had to kill a Russian soldier on the front. And he said, it was so far from me. And he was explaining these feelings, and he was speaking calmly, softly. And when I was listening to him, and he was projecting so much strength, and I was listening to him, and I had in my ear what I was seeing the day before, the night before, which was Alex Jones. This guy speaks like that, and who goes to the bodybuilding every day for 7 hours. Instead of reading books. And he was speaking like that. You woke people, and we have to go back to masculinism and everything. And he was telling, but Joe Biden is crazy because Putin will nuke us, with his big voice and everything. And in fact, what he was projecting was such weakness, such fragility, yeah? And I was thinking, okay, so the strength is the soft voice of this Ukrainian poet writing love letters to his wife. And there you have the spectacle of strength, be it orange or not orange. And at the end, we have to be strong. It doesn't mean copying them. It means being sure of ourselves. Take power, but this time, when we take power, we ban TikTok and we put Elon Musk on a huge fine so that then they take us seriously.
Thank you. So, merci. That was fantastic. So, lesson learned that our movement sometimes is poetic and a little too esoteric, and their movement is damn literal. So thank you so much for this fantastic conversation. I promise I did not pay him to end us on this notion of shared destiny. The struggle and the tension is between deliverism and this notion of shared destiny that we take up that I think can lead to a more durable center-left narrative, more durable majorities for change and transformation into the future. Thank you, phenomenal panelists. Thank you.
Wow, it's certainly been a journey. It's been a journey. 11 sessions in this summit so far, and